Today we are here to discuss the state of Indian democracy, its successes, failures, its promises, and its performance. We have a distinguished panel here of louder. How about the people at the back? Are you able to hear? Yeah, I see lots of thumbs ups. That's good. Great. Some of people in the front are unable to hear. Okay. As I was saying, we have a distinguished panel here of politicians who have been members of parliament and held constitutional positions. To open the discussion, here are some things I always wanted to say to politicians, and I'm sure many of you also have, but never knew how. India is a land of reinterpretations, and as with other things, I think we have also reinterpreted democracy. Democracy means different things to different people, although I believe that essentially democracy must mean the same things to different people. Let me give you some examples. First, elections seem to not bring about the change in perspective, rather change in the people in power. We have seen that happen over a period of decades. The poor remain poor, though successive governments, through successive governments and generations go by waiting for opportunities and basic amenities like shelter and healthcare. Democracy is meaningless for the poor. To them, it merely represents the aspirations of a distant India, the one that controls elections with its articulation and with its wealth. I believe that the vote of the poor is required for winning elections, but not for staying in power in the Indian democracy. Second, women are in a constant state of war in India. They are attacked in public places and in homes, and their survival is conditional upon their silence and their surrender. Elections have been won on the promise of another basic requirement of any country, the safety for women. Political careers have been made for the simplest of things, that women are able to return home from work safely, that they can sleep at home in peace, that they are able to marry and divorce by choice. Democracy is meaningless for women, I believe, who are fixed by the state in the binaries of patriarchy through procedure and policy. However, on the positive side, democracy has energized the underprivileged sections and minorities to enter the decision-making elected houses. They have found representation because of the vote, and that is an undeniable achievement. But this has not brought about the change in society envisaged in our constitution. Why do I say that? Because at any time, any event or any remark can invoke the divisions on caste and religious lines in our country, and we have been witness to that. Politicians swear by secularism and equality. That is the requirement of democratic politics. But the ease with which they disregard such ideals in practice shows the ideological hypocrisy that democracy allows and seems to reward. I'm sure these issues bother every one of us, every one of you present here. Or perhaps I have these problems with democracy because I'm from JNU, I don't know. Well, anyway, to know more and to analyze what kind of dance of democracy is this, I shall now request the distinguished panel to speak for about 5 to 10 minutes perhaps on this issue, and then we can have a discussion and open for questions from the audience. Please, Pavanji.
It's a curious title, The Dance of Democracy. I want to say as a prefatory note that India as a civilization has had one of the most complex, sophisticated, nuanced, and exceptionally developed sense of rhythm. If you look at our whole tradition of music, the simple beat has been replaced by a very complex rhythm, which is fascinating because even though it is complex, it is comes together at some point, जिसको कहते हैं Indian classical music में सम पर आना. Now, something in the great dance of democracy today, कहीं ना कहीं there has been some distortion कि चीजें सम पर नहीं आ रही. And one of the reasons for that is that a pillar of democracy is the ability to debate, to disagree, to listen, to argue, even as you are open to a suggestion from the other side. And that constitutes a great tradition in Indian civilization called Shastrarth. I've just finished a book on Adi Shankaracharya. His entire debate was based on Shastrarth, where you have a discussion and a debate. I think somewhere in our democracy today, that ability to be open to discussion is being replaced by the reflex desire to immediately assert what you think is right and expect others to believe it. And it's a danger to our democracy. Democracy cannot be a label which is defined by periodic elections. It has to become a certain temperament, a certain spirit, a certain approach to issues, and how to resolve them through this process. कि कुछ आप कहिए, कुछ मैं कहूँ, दोनों ही सुने, without this brittleness which has come into the political fabric. And the other issue that is related to this is that if you don't agree now, beyond the purview of democracy, you bring in the notion of sedition. You bring in the notion that if you don't agree with me in the manner that I am stating it, then you are liable to be anti-national. This whole definition of nationalism in the context of democracy, only within the narrow confines of what I think is right, rather than the fact that you could also be saying something that I should listen to. That is a very dangerous trend to democracy, and we should all introspect about it. I am not pointing a finger only on one political party, but perhaps I have two fingers pointed at one political party. The point is very simple, that if you have such a system, then the entire political system and its very complex dance works towards certain goals in a cooperative manner. And those goals must include, in our country especially, that the dividends of growth through a democratic process reach the poorest of the poor and the marginalized. We may be the world's largest democracy, but I'm fond of saying this. I'm not fond of saying this. I say this with a great deal of sadness, that there are two Indias in one India. Both are participants in democracy, but both are not equal beneficiaries of the dividends of democratic process. So we have the largest number of the abjectly poor in the world. We have the largest number of people who can't read and write. We have the largest number of malnutrition children. This inequality, which is part of how democracy should resolve it, if it is not being resolved at a pace which meets or matches the expectations of people, somewhere the dance of democracy is distorted. The second thing is that we have a huge demographic dividend, if you call it that, in terms of what we say we are a young country. We are not only a young republic and an ancient civilization, we are a young republic. And so the young must have faith in democracy. If their feeling is that democracy is meant for those who otherwise can't be employed anywhere else, the dividends are very high, so there is a great ambition also behind joining politics. But there must be respect for the political process. The respect for the political process comes through having leaders who can inspire the young, at least through some value system. There must be at least some benchmarks by which the people say that those who we elect to lead us qualify to inspire us to become, in a sense, better citizens of the nation. And they have expectations which by their sheer numbers, the sheer numbers of the young, if they are not fulfilled, we have a situation where there is an essential disjoint between those who are going to be the inheritors and legatees of this democracy and its current functioning today. That's the second point that we must look at. The third is, and I've already referred to it, but I want to emphasize it, that normally in a democracy, even if opposition and disagreement is very, very trenchant, यानी कि आप और हम बिल्कुल ही अलग स्वभाव के हैं, I think there have to be self-imposed areas of restraint which you don't cross. However much the anger, you don't stone a bus with children in the name of a cause, and in the hope that those who are supposed to maintain law and order are somewhat complicit in your taking the law in your own hands. And it is happening repeatedly. You have, I'm not trying to make this partisan, but a Dalit leader, for instance, of the Bhim Sena is in jail under the NSA. But every leader of this group, which has even stoned a bus with young children, is openly free speaking on television and spewing venom. भाई ये कहाँ की सभ्यता है? ये लोकतंत्र है क्या? विश्वास नहीं होगा तो लोकतंत्र नहीं चल सकता. So you have to create that sense of faith. Just tell me when to stop. So you need that faith. You need to have the resilience of hope in democracy. And if you don't have it, then we ritualize democracy, like we have ritualized Hinduism. People go through festivals or rituals, they don't even know the symbolism behind it. कि इनके मायने क्या है? And now that I have worked on a book just now on the great loftiness of thought of Hinduism, I can say that if you take away that thinking and merely follow the rituals, then that again is a distortion of the great dance of thought itself. And that is what is happening, that we go through the rituals of democracy. Elections आए, vote किया, फिर देखा कौन जीता, फिर जो जीता उसकी मुसाहबियत की, उसके साथ लग गए, फिर देखते हैं अगली बार क्या होता है, किसका भाव चढ़ रहा है, किसका भाव गिर रहा है. And somewhere, and this is very important and I'll end here, somewhere what is most dangerous is that it begins to devalue the ordinary citizen's participation in democracy. And when that happens, because that's the only bulwark, never trust politicians to reform themselves. It's the people who must set the benchmark and participate in the democratic process with the ideological conviction that if we are truly a vibrant democracy, there must be certain principles and manners of behavior which are sacrosanct. And if they are not happening, we are going to protest because we are the most powerful component of a democracy, the people of India themselves. And that faith must not be lost.
Thank you. Thank you, Pavanji, for that wonderful analysis. Sachin, please. 7 to 8 minutes.
जी, पहले तो मैं बोलना चाह रहा था, हम जो 5 लोग यहाँ बैठे हैं, इनमें से मुझे पता नहीं मैम आप लेखक हैं कि नहीं, but all the other 3 are very well-known authors. So my few minutes of speaking will not be so articulate and as passionate as Mr. Pavan Varma ji is. I know you also wrote a book and Manvendra Singh also is the author. तो मैं तो बड़ा साधारण एक political कार्य करता हूँ, so I'm going to focus. आपने भी लिखी है? तो I'm the only one who's not written a book.
No. I'm also very sadharan because I write about sadharan people.
Okay, so I have a very few points to make. I tend to agree with most things that Mr. Varma has pointed out in a very sophisticated fashion. But to break it down more, in my view, I think the fact that we talked about our democracy being insufficient in many ways, It's perhaps true. But if you look at any other way that this country would have governed itself or functioned or chosen to rule itself, we would have been far worse off. So whatever may be the deficiencies or shortcomings of our systems, which we have to improve, and believe me, Pavanji, the only people who can actually reform the system is going to be the politicians themselves. I think it's unfair to expect the people or non-government organizations or the media to come and start changing our own mindsets. It has to be done from within. If you go back 60, 70 years, I think the initial 2 or 3 decades were spent in entrenching the sense of democracy into the roots of our nation. Don't forget in 1952, when we've had a first election, a lot of people in the West thought that democracy is not for the hungry and for the illiterate. It was India which took up on the challenge to have adult franchise, one person, one vote, and it took, I think, some time for it to entrench itself into the hearts and minds of our voting communities. That's first 2 or 3 decades. I think country evolved and we moved on to having equality, social justice, etc., etc. Now, in this century, in this decade, at least my generation of politicians will, I think, be judged most by the amount of economic opportunity we open up for our peers and for the generation ahead of us. And we shouldn't fool ourselves, because I think at age 40, I know for a fact that more than half of India is younger than I am, and the median age is 27. So politicians have this very sorry notion that they remain young for a long time or forever sometimes. वो होता नहीं है Pavan ji. I'm sorry, not for you generally, you're a very young man. But generally politicians feel that we will be in power forever, we will remain young forever, and we'll be popular forever. See, whatever goes up must come down. And the minute you have reconciled to the fact that you will not be so famous and popular and in power and young for eternity, then there's a sense of reality that seeps in, which is very important. I think few people tend not to have that. But our democracy, for whatever noise that we have and all the ills that people find and functioning of our systems, I still think that we may have the highest number of people who are illiterate or highest number of kids who are malnourished. But look at where we started off from. I mean, if you look at the relative numbers, we've done a tremendous job. I may not agree with some of our friends who are not in my political party, but that doesn't mean that we have to be acrimonious. And I always say this, I'm heading a political party in the state. Whatever may be our disagreements, it has to be at a policy level, it has to be at an ideological level. It cannot be personal, it shouldn't be personal. And more important, people must look at you as someone who they can cite an example of. Here is a person from X political party. I may or may not like him or her, but I respect the fact that he or she treats the competition in a very fair manner. We are all competitors. We are not enemies. And the fact that any political party that gives you a sense of acrimony or sense of confrontation is doing injustice, at least to the young minds that are watching us on television or on WhatsApp, on social media. So to get into a position of power is perhaps the single most important thing for a political party. But is that all that parties exist for? I think every party, there are 40 parties in parliament, every party has a role to play, every leader has a contribution to make, but are we as a political class wise enough, broad-minded enough, and most importantly, large-hearted enough to accept those other points of view? I think no debate, no deliberation, no discussion is healthy if there's not disagreement. But that disagreement should not lead to enmity, to use of force, to use of political agencies, government agencies to defame, dishonor, and denounce other people. I was hearing Pavan Varma ji talking. Some of you may have noticed I was on my phone trying to message. I wasn't messaging anybody else, but this is the true dance of democracy. We have elections going on right now. Polling is happening in Ajmer and Alwar. I got reports of some EVMs not working, some small tussle going on in some booths. So as important as the session is, I still thought it's more important for me to respond to those problems that were happening and to try and take care of it. So that's how entrenched politicians are in this country. No other country in the world has politicians who are so wedded to the process. But the process must be sacrosanct. The fact that change of governments, change of leadership, regime happens seamlessly is, I think, an absolute miracle that happens in no other country in Southern Asia. If you look at our neighbors, the change of government happens with a lot of blood on the streets. So therefore, I'm very happy with the way things are, but am I absolutely satisfied? Can we not improve? can our leaderships across political parties not evolve to a point where we can work, and some areas of, I'll finish, some areas of our politics must be off limits. I agree with Pavanji when you say that foreign policy, internal security, basic well-being of our citizens, all these things should not be a matter of discussion in country, because we know that these are the common objectives of all political parties. How to get there, that's where differences arise. But we must respect each other's views even if we differ, and we must show to the people of India that we are actually working for the betterment of the nation and not for betterment of ourselves. If that sense of responsibility is inculcated in the political class, it will by default be emulated by the citizens. I'll end here and answer questions later.
Thank you, Sachin. Jyoti Kiran ji, please.
Namaskar, JLF. I think I'll take the entire thing from a different kind of a point of view, not as a writer's point of view, as you said, because one writer has already spoken and two others are there in the list. In a more holistic way, maybe in a more mechanism way, and for want of a better word, I will say that I will evaluate the entire thing in a digital ecosystem type, where some hardware is there. Pavanji explained and Sachin explained that we have a wonderful hardware. Some CPU would be there, some ASICs will be there, some chips will be there. So we have constitution, certain values, certain ethos, and everything to be attained in terms of some mathematical objective function. That we will certainly do. But in terms of this, the beautiful part, which I think both my speakers should have mentioned, is the decentralization of democracy in this country. In 2 lakh, we have taken it out from the parliament and right there to the root of the, Indian rural villages in terms of panchayats. We have more than 2 lakh panchayats where more than 29 lakh representatives are absolutely exercising, and this, whatever distortion you say with, performing the dance of democracy, or maybe translating the dance of democracy. And these people, I mean, out of that, as you said, women, you raised that question. I must tell you, 58% of them are women in Rajasthan. Moreover, 46% at all India level. So this narrative is a bit stale. I mean, I would go beyond that and would mention that this democracy is not only changed in the political decentralization, but at the same time, economic decentralization also, because after the 14th Finance Commission, straight from the CFC, the money is going to the panchayats for the first time, and you know how much? Around 2 lakh crores. So we have economically sustainable democracy here in terms of the institutions. The second part, of course, comes the software. Most of the young faces I can see, you understand the difference between a hardware and a software. And here I agree with Pavanji that software, and here I would quote Ambedkar ji, very, in the last Constituent Assembly, I feel, however good a constitution may be, it's sure to turn out bad, because those who are called to work at it happen to be a bad lot. The working of the constitution does not depend only on the nature of the constitution, it depends on the people and the political parties. They will set up as their instruments to carry out their insights and their politics. And this objective function, which was closer incidentally to Deen Dayal Upadhyay ji, was absolutely, I mean, we certainly need to retrospect, we certainly need to think. आपने कहा शास्त्रार्थ की ज़रूरत है, लेकिन किस परिवेश में शास्त्रार्थ की ज़रूरत है? शास्त्रार्थ के परिवेश को भी हमें रचना होता है पवन जी, और उस परिवेश को रचने की शुरुआत तब कभी नहीं की जा सकती जब योर प्राइम मिनिस्टर इज selling your investment, your country hard in Davos, and somebody calls him a foreign agent. ये शास्त्रार्थ की शुरुआत करने का क्या परिवेश है? उस पर प्रश्न क्यों नहीं उठते, प्रश्न चिन्ह क्यों नहीं आते? You very rightly said, I mean, I read you, I follow you also, but at the same time, a very different kind, I mean, Pavanji, I'm sorry to say, but it's a perennial pessimist narrative of democracy which we enjoy, sever, and sometimes, you know, I don't know, we want to sustain that also for whatever reason. अब अगर सिस्टम में बग हैं, बिल्कुल हैं, 100% हैं, you know how to debug them, everybody knows. अगर सिस्टम में faults हैं, अगर सिस्टम की दिक्कतें हैं, you know, we know first of all we have to have a bug finder there. We are shy in terms of having a bug finder. And here I agree to some extent with Sachin ji कि political parties इसमें आने चाहिए, politicians चूँकि empowered हैं, आगे आने चाहिए. पर मेरा प्रतिप्रश्न है कि 55 साल तक क्यों नहीं आए? 55 वर्ष तक मैं इसको दलीय डिबेट में, I wanted a bipartisan above the party. But at the same time, the institutions that our forefathers have designed in terms of entrenching democracy, as you said, we spent many years. और उससे भी पूर्व भारत की संस्कृति में ही हम संघ देखते हैं, गण देखते हैं. हमें भले ही आज ये महसूस करने में, ये लिखने में बहुत तकलीफ होती है, लेकिन डेमोक्रेसी कहीं नई उठकर, इट्स नॉट एलियन टू अस. ये हमारे बौद्ध समय से हमारे साथ मौजूद है, हमारे सिस्टम के भीतर है. जिस गवर्नमेंट थ्रू डिस्कशन की आप बात कर रहे हैं पवन जी और सचिन जी, ये तो हमने तभी खोज निकाली थी जब अभी ग्रीस और रोमन डेमोक्रेसीज की रचना भी नहीं हुई थी. तो उस समय से लेकर मैं इसमें संस्कृति के डिबेट में बिल्कुल वापस नहीं जाना चाह रही, पर चूंकि आपने हिंदुइज्म की बात की है, तो लोकतंत्र तो हिंदुइज्म का एक बहुत बड़ा अंश है, बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा है. और साथ चलकर सामूहिकता की भावना के साथ उसको व्यक्त करना हर भारतीय का एक आंतरिक धर्म है, जिसको हम लगातार करते रहे. ज़रूर डिस्टॉर्शंस हैं, किसने मना किया, लेकिन साथ ही साथ इसमें इंटीग्रेट होने की, इसमें समर्थ होने की एंड अपने आप को डीबग करने की जो एक इनहेरेंट शक्ति मौजूद है, उस शक्ति को भी हमने समझना चाहिए. मैं एक ऐसे परिवार से आती हूँ जिसने इमरजेंसी को बर्दाश्त किया है और भुगता है, इसलिए मैं पक्का जानती हूँ कि डेमोक्रेसी से बेहतर कुछ नहीं है.
थैंक यू.
1 minute I'll just take on that. और इससे पूर्व जो हम अभी इसी लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल के इसी प्रकार के आधुनिक मंचों से some cozy intellectual spaces have been constructed and people have spoken about reclaiming Hinduism from हिंदुत्व. हिंदुत्व की डिबेट मैंने नहीं लाई, पवन जी आपने लाई. अब लाई है तो बात दूर तलक जाएगी.
थैंक यू.
अब जस्ट वन लाइन, ये जो हिंदुइज्म को रिक्लेम करने की बात है भाई, ये हिंदुइज्म को रिक्लेम नहीं करना, ये गई हुई सत्ता का दुख है. इस सत्ता को रिक्लेम करने की बात है. और ये सिर्फ इतने लोग सहमत हैं. अच्छा, सिर्फ इतनी ही बात नहीं है. आई जस्ट no problem, you can ask questions at the end. I mean,
Jyoti,
now this is what democracy is all
let's
about.
give the
I
other
have a right to
speaker-
speak. Shashi ji spoke there.
Yes,
Certainly.
you have a right to
Shashi,
reply.
all of us are replying. I mean, you started the debate of
Manvendra ji
Hinduism.
hasn't been able to speak.
Just one liner. तो उस सत्ता की,
democracy.
उस सत्ता को रिक्लेम करने के भीतर नियो हिंदूस, कोजी हिंदूस, सूडो हिंदूस, ये जनता द्वारा अपने आप, people of India are very smart. They know what Hinduism is. It's a way of life. They know it's not thinking in terms of any divisive politics. They defined Hinduism through their way of life, and they'll take care of it in terms of identifying neo-Hindus, quasi-Hindus, or maybe pseudo-Hindus.
And
Thank you very much.
Democratic Hindus, possibly. Thank you, Jyoti ji. Manvendra ji, please.
Thank you. I think I'll take a different tack on democracy, and basically what Neelima started off was about has the real.
I think the thrust of Neelima's opening remarks was basically about has democracy delivered, and in terms of the data on current performance, whether it is gender or it is poor and rich, etc. I'll take off on that because I think Jyoti ji has given all the statistics. It's always an advantage to have an economist speak before you, so they take care of all the figures. There's a disquiet in India between democracy and the state. Democracy, as we practice it, is the universal concept of deciding through vote. And that concept and that practice is totally secure. Whatever the naysayers might want to point at, it's totally secure. It's now, in fact, part of the Indian DNA. You can't take it away from the Indians. And it's entrenched in our system, it's entrenched in our thought. And, Sachin Pilot and I, every 5 years, we go through a grueling process of having to chase voters. And the advantage that Jyoti just mentioned briefly, the advantage of somebody contesting a panchayat election, man or woman contesting a panchayat election, the advantage that he or she has is that unlike MP or MLA election, the voters chase the candidate in the panchayat election. They come from all over the country to vote. I have voters sitting in, actually, 42 households sitting in end of the country, at the bottom end in Kanyakumari. And I try, pray, beg, but not more than half of them would come and vote during my election. But when their panchayat polls, every single person, man or woman, is there to vote in a panchayat election. Polling in a panchayat election is way higher than any Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha election. It is just the nature of Indian politics, how the panchayat is run, and what it means to be participant in that process, and what it means to belong to the winning candidate or, sometimes to the losing candidate. That participation is so sacrosanct that it cannot be taken away, and that is the most secure part of the Indian democracy, which we tend to overlook because we assume or we limit our analysis of democracy in terms of just, MP, MLA. The disquiet that I was alluding to in terms of the state, let's be dispassionate about it and let's be honest, introspect to ourselves. The Indian state is basically a continuation of the colonial state. The delivery mechanism is what the colonial system decided, that the district would be run by an SP and a collector, and that in those days Gora Sahibs, who collected the revenue and who maintained law and order. The transformation has happened in terms of, the collector now also collects revenue in that sense, but is also now part of administration and delivery and 82 other things. But the state in a district still controls far more of a common Indian citizen's life than ought to, especially in the 21st century when digital decisions are so paramount and instant justice on a WhatsApp message decides the performance or the, bad performance, good performance of a crowd. You have lumpens who get together to stone a bus on basis of a digital message, and you have information traversing the whole world in seconds. But at the same time, the state, which is delivering the district, takes its own sweet time and takes its own slow process, which was decided by the Gora Sahib 80 years ago, 90 years ago, 100 years ago. So that disquiet is what is causing this angst and this impatience and this this JNU people who keep questioning whether this the system is
JNU
working
people?
or not. Yes, of course.
JNU people.
So it's that I think that debate on how the Indian state should function is, for me, is a more valuable debate and I would really benefit from hearing how people analyze the state, because most of the people sitting here and listening to this debate in English don't really live in districts, and most Indians who live in districts are so governed by their patwari and the thana. You can't imagine how their lives revolve around these two institutions. Everything, starts and ends with them. And that mechanism is where we really should focus. And, Jyoti ji has given all the data on gender and, all those indices. Things have changed a lot in the villages. Things have changed a lot in the countryside. Even Sachin Pilot alluded to that. So I won't get into that debate. But it's a state, the nature of the state and the functioning of the state that I'm really intrigued by, and I'm looking at, analysis and answers for.
Thank you. Thank you, Manvendra ji.
May I respond? Some of the direct comments made on what I said.
Yes, I think to the direct comments.
In a Hindu way.
In a democratic way, because
Hindu way.
this debate is about democracy, it's not about Hindutva.
ज्योति जी ने 2-3 चीज कही और उनकी इजाजत से का जवाब तो मैं समझता हूँ वाजिब है। बागबान कहते हैं जो गार्डन को प्रोटेक्ट करता है, और उन्होंने बात की हिंदुत्व की और हिंदुइज्म की, और शेर ये है कि यूं दिखाता है आंखें मुझे बागबान यूं दिखाता है आंखें मुझे बागबां जैसे गुलशन पे कुछ हक हमारा नहीं, हमारा भी हक है. I am proud to be a Hindu. At least half a dozen books I've written on the great and loftiness of thought of Hinduism. But आप कहिए कि साहब, I know what is Hinduism and you follow what I say is right. And I say no. Because I think that many of those
No, I think let's talk.
who, I will come back to democracy, but then the question is raised, it needs an answer.
Yes.
And it's part of a democratic discourse. So therefore, I think that this whole business of bringing religion into politics with such blatancy, and you can't deny it anymore, it's verifiable, it can be seen. We are a religious people, but we fight we have a contest in democracy, not by invoking religion. और हिंदुइज्म तो एक ऐसा धर्म है, अगर आप लक्ष्मी को निगलेक्ट करेंगे और लोगों से कहेंगे कि राम के लिए ईंट उठाए तब भी प्रॉब्लम है. लोगों के धंधे बंद हैं, काम नहीं मिल रहा, आप कहिए मंदिर बना दीजिए. खैर छोड़िए उसको, उसमें भी बना भी दीजिए, मैं तो कहता हूँ. इट्स अ वेरी गुड थिंग. मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तम राम की तो हम सब पूजा करते हैं. बट माई रियल पॉइंट इज, please don't claim a monopoly that you speak for Hinduism and those who don't agree with you are not Hindus. Point number one. Point number two, yes, it was a great civilization. Lichavis mein republic thi, it was smaller, compact group of people, we had democracy, direct representation, but it's been a long journey from there. And all political parties need to introspect what have the distortions which have crept into democracy. Either you can say everything is nice, or you can say there are things to correct. भाई जो हमने in the past achieve किया था, दिल से तो हर मुआमला करके चले थे साफ हम. दिल से तो हर मुआमला करके चले थे साफ हम, कहने में उनके सामने बात बदल गई. आज ये सिनारियो है that today one of the beach of corruption across India permeating through every level is the nexus between unaccountable money and politics. And by the way, even the panchayat elections are not insulated from it.
Absolutely.
They are the most expensive ones.
They are the most expensive, and we know exactly how some of them are run.
Pavan ji, can I intervene to ask you about the
Neelima, one
idea
sec.
of transparency in political funding?
Now, in my view, the current reform, quote unquote, that has been brought doesn't bring in any transparency. In fact, it legitimizes anonymous donors except through the process of bonds. And nothing is anonymous in this country, by the way.
Right. So who's
So
funding?
therefore, who is funding which party and why?
Will we ever
But
know?
only thing is not through cash but through bonds. But it is not a reform. आपको मालूम है, इलेक्शन कमीशन आज 30 साल से कह रहा है कि एक प्रोविजन है सिर्फ हमारे रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ पीपल्स एक्ट में कि 20,000 रुपए से जो वो प्रोविजन है इस वक्त, वो कहते हैं अप टू 20,000 रुपीज एनीबडी कैन गिव अ डोनेशन इन कैश विदाउट नेमिंग द डोनर. Every political party has hundreds of donations of 19,999. And the election commission is saying we need to
Absolutely.
repeal this
Yes,
article.
yes.
But no political party has come forward to do it because all political parties have a vested interest where these matters are concerned. So I'm not making it a partisan debate. I'm saying all of us need to
Of course.
introspect. And the last point, because it was raised, is भाई किस परिप्रेक्ष्य में शास्त्रार्थ होता है, किस परिप्रेक्ष्य में शास्त्रार्थ होता है. And we are all proud of the Prime Minister when he goes abroad and speaks for India. I applauded the speech of the Prime Minister on television when he spoke at Davos. But agar simultaneously while you are inviting foreign investment, there is mayhem going on, which is visible today because of the sheer speed and intrusiveness of media. And if it's making headlines elsewhere, do I or do I not? have the right, even as a proud citizen, proud of my Prime Minister, to ask a question of what is happening to law and order in my country. आपसे मैं सवाल पूछता हूं, मतलब ये है कि farmers are committing suicide. Answer ये कि आप कहिए भारत माता की जय. It can't work like this, you know. It's reducing politics to a level of juvenile this thing कि बात पर वहाँ जुबान कटती है वो कहें और सुना करे कोई.
Thank you. Sachin ji, I have a question for you. Is there
Neelima, I think 1 minute का अगर
can,
उत्तर
we,
आप
can I come to you? I have a
because it is right here and I just want to respond.
No,
I mean, I have this
a
much
question.
democratic
I have a
right.
question on women for you. I have a question. No.
What is it that you want? You want me to respond to it?
No.
देखिए,
No.
शास्त्रार्थ का परिप्रेक्ष्य तय करने वाले भी वी द पीपल ऑफ इंडिया हैं. कीजिए शास्त्रार्थ का परिप्रेक्ष्य तय. पहला प्रश्न. दूसरी महत्वपूर्ण बात ये है कि जैसा आपने कहा, हिंदुइज्म को मैंने इस डिबेट में नहीं लाया, मैंने केवल रिस्पॉन्ड किया है.
Madam, I have a question on women of India. Would you like to answer?
1 minute, let me just complete a
I
sentence,
have
madam.
a question on poverty. I have a question on farmers.
I would
farmers'
certainly,
suicide. I have a question
certainly,
on unemployment.
certainly. But
Thank
since
you.
he
Thank you.
answered directly, I think my
I
audience
think-
wanted
I
me
think
to
we are
respond to
running
that.
out of time.
And
There are
दूसरी
several questions.
दूसरी महत्वपूर्ण बात जो आपने कही वो बिल्कुल निश्चित तौर पर ये है कि अगर एक देश का प्रधानमंत्री हम सबका प्रधानमंत्री है, हम सबके प्रधानमंत्री हैं, तो जिस प्रकार की भाषा का उपयोग हम बहुत अच्छे तरीके से जानते हैं, मैं किस चीज़ को रेफर कर रही हूँ, उस दृष्टि से हमें निश्चित तौर पर बात करनी चाहिए. आई थिंक बात करने का समय है, इसलिए चूंकि हम अपने लोकतंत्र की मर्यादा खुद तय करेंगे. द थर्ड पार्ट ऑफ कोर्स which you mentioned here is about electoral reforms. There is a big debate going on in terms of the one-time elections, simultaneous elections. Please contribute to that debate.
Thank you.
And now you would say thank you here because I know it is very difficult to even penetrate this narrative. We've been able to penetrate this narrative after a very, very long time.
I'd like to give the other
Yeah.
speakers an opportunity. Sachin ji, I have a question for you. Is for instance right to recall? Can you hear me? Right to recall elected representatives. This is a right which gives the voters a chance to recall elected representatives in case they do not serve up to the expectations of the voters. Do you think that's something which is possible? I know the narrative that this country is very big, यहाँ पे right to recall काम नहीं करेगा, बहुत पैसे लगेंगे, etc. But is there a way we can make it happen?
Frankly speaking, I believe that we have larger and more important issues to focus on as
Right.
opposed to right to recall. It's philosophically, ideologically very
Also functionally.
morally, it's very nice to think of all those things. We can spend time and energy to do that. It's what is not possible. Everything is possible. But should that be the top of our priority?
Yes,
Okay.
especially if the politicians are not
no,
delivering.
No, I think you have to make them accountable. By recalling somebody else will get elected. And you recall that person.
Okay. How do we make them accountable?
Well, I think there has to be a gamut of issues. It can't just be the threat of recall. I mean, to give you an example, in our criminal justice system, we have the death penalty.
Sure.
Does it stop people from raping and murdering other people?
Right.
What happens in India is that we should have surety of punishment as opposed to the severity of punishment. So by threatening to recall, will all politicians become honest? I think data suggests possibly not. What we could do is make them accountable to the people who elect them, make the parliament much more judicious in the way they conduct. I mean, when I say they, because I'm not in parliament, we conduct ourselves. But right to recall may empower the citizens. I'm not too sure if it's the most important thing we could do to reform our political system.
Sure.
Two things we've done recently, and I think someone said that politicians can't reform themselves. You know, this horse trading was put to an end by this amendment in the law. About 2/3 of MPs, MLAs required to break parties.
Right.
The 10 schedule. The other positive reform was to limit the number of ministers to 10% of the strength of the parliament and assembly. Earlier, UP had, I think, 105 ministers out of 400
Right.
MLAs.
Yeah.
So there have been some positive developments. I think it's wrong to sweep every political party and politician of 70 years to have managed this country and where we are today, proud as we are of our nation, we've come a long way. Let's just take a minute and applaud the contribution, the sacrifice and the dedication of all political people across the board that have contributed. But should we be happy at where we are? We should be proud, but aspire to get more things done. Right to recall, again, I'm going out and saying it on a limb. I don't think it's something that we should really try and put our focus on right now. It's more important to make sure that our MLAs and MPs are working honestly, there is a counterbalance, there is a check, and leadership.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, Neelima, 1 second. The leadership of the parties, right? They are, MPs, MLAs are much more scared of the party president than they are of the voters who recall them. So I think the
Right.
political party leadership must make them accountable.
That's very frank. Thank you. I have a question from the the readers of Rajasthan Patrika for the entire panel, which is that what do you have to say to the youth of the country or your state about employment, about jobs, और बेरोजगारी को खत्म करने के लिए आपके पास क्या तरीका है? पवन जी?
No, I think that there is a genuine crisis today in terms of the creation of more jobs. You can give statistics to show that partly those who are critical have no reason to be that critical, but the shortage of jobs, as especially compared to the promises made, is very obvious. Every day, 30,000 people enter the job market, of which between 450 and 500 get jobs. And where do the rest go? And a linked question to that is with jobs, that unless you invest in the public education system and give people the right skills, large numbers of those who even graduate are unemployable. You are competing now in a global market. India has aspirations, rightly enough, to be a superpower. You must be able to produce. I mean, you are not investing in the public education system.
So that's the solution then. Sachin ji, you?
I think India is, there are not two Indias, there are 3 or 4 Indias. I think the simple solution is, we have a lot of higher education, good institutions, we have a lot of IT sector which is doing tremendously well. But the real solution to the problem will be to shift people who work on the farmlands, the families of people who are land tillers, who are working off the field, to shift them from the farm fields to the shop floor. Low skilled, low training, but they have to get into the industrial space, manufacturing space. For us to think that tertiary services and IT sector will give jobs to everybody is not going to happen. I think we must invest in, for example, in Europe, electrician, a plumber, a TV repair person, they need good quality people. In India, to find good drivers, good domestic help, trained people who can do small jobs, that I think is a much larger gap for us to fill. The families of farmers, sad point is, Neelima, I have not met a farmer who says to me कि मैं अपने बच्चों को पढ़ा लिखा के farmer बनाऊंगा.
Absolutely.
Now what happens is they rather do something else than do farming. So their pride has gone away. But the farmlands must shift to the shop floor, factories, manufacturing, and then move on the scale of employment. But he's right, Pavanji. We are not investing enough in our education system at the grassroots.
Absolutely. Jyoti ji.
जिस देश को अपने डेमोग्राफिक डिविडेंड को सबसे पहले समझना है, certainly that country should certainly invest more. While as an activist of ABVP, we were demanding 6% of the total GDP should be, invested in education, higher education, primary education. At the same time, I would tend to agree with Sachin ji here कि पूरा सीधा agriculture में absorption की क्षमता नहीं है. Manufacturing has to be increased, and therefore Prime Minister's Make in India program, definitely Mudra, definitely in terms of the entrepreneurship. I mean, we can say that 17 lakhs employment have been created in 1 year here, and in Rajasthan 13 lakhs in terms of training, skills, and these middle level employments. But सबसे बड़ी बात ये है, like Sachin ji said, attitudinal change also is required. Everybody wants a government job. Now, at the same time, due to the globalization, government is more as a facilitator. Government is not producer in many areas anymore. You from JNU might have a different view, but the reality is different. So therefore,
I have a different view.
yeah. So therefore, I mean, I anticipated that. So therefore, absorption in
Nobody wants
economy
to listen to
and
it.
creation, job creation in economy, they have to match somewhere.
Thank you, ma'am.
Again, I would say this digital India has got great potential. So we can have three things. Number one, like Gram Agritech we did here in Rajasthan. 1,500 crores were MOUs are coming. I mean, here. agriculture, there has to be a marriage of agriculture and industry at the same time, and Rajasthan is doing it. You've given me 2 minutes. One final thing, that in terms of understanding the employment dynamics, we have to think in terms of the population dynamics also.
Thank you. Marvin, sorry, I haven't been able to give you too much time.
No, it's okay. Somebody, I think Pavanji gave, sorry.
Pavanji gave the example of 40-odd political parties in parliament. And I think there are 40-odd solutions to employment in India because there's no one, one size that fits all. You have to look at various aspects that create employment in this country. And I was very pleasantly surprised a couple of weeks ago in Barmer, my district headquarters, a new cafe is opened serving proper coffee. You'd be surprised. And I ordered a proper, Americano, and the person serving me was from Kupwara in Kashmir. And in deep desert Barmer, somebody from Kupwara is serving me coffee, and I thought that was fabulous for integration of the country, of course, but also in terms of this, this young lad found an opportunity in Barmer, for his skill of making coffee and serving it. So you look at various aspects to find, opportunities for the young. There is no one, like Sachin said, there's no IT and there's no one solution. Agriculture is certainly a non-starter because we tend to sort of make a myth of it. We haven't really analyzed what agriculture does to this country and what it is helping, how much it is helping, and how much it needs to be injected with to help more. And agriculture still remains a holy cow. We haven't had a debate on agriculture, and I wish someday people would see how much more potential there is in agriculture that is being wasted.
Thank you. Can we now take some questions? We are very short of time because of the very articulate panel we have had today. But I'll take 2 questions from the front and 2 from the back, and I'll definitely make sure that 2 are men and 2 are women.
Yes.
So I suggest that I don't see any women in the front.
Yeah.
Okay. So, ma'am, yeah. And you will have to mention if the question is for the entire panel or one of the speakers.
My question is to everyone. So why have politicians in India adopted a policy that was followed by the Britishers, which is divide and rule, which has destroyed our country once already, and it has the potential to do it again? Why do they still bank on that policy alone?
Thank you. Very briefly.
Because they want to come to power. And it's very unfortunate, and you've asked an exceptionally insightful question. Playing one caste against another, using religion to divide the electorate through deliberate design, not coincidentally. And the only check to that will be when the people who are citizens will say, enough is enough. Deliver on the secular dividends that you promised. Jobs, roads, hospitals, schools, employment. That's when things will change.
Sir. Yellow t-shirt.
We always say that India is the largest democracy.
Who is the question for?
To the panel, anyone
Panel.
who wants to
Okay.
answer. So we always say that India is the largest democracy. But if you look at the parties that rule across the nation, they are being run like personal fiefdoms. I mean, I don't think they are very democratic
Good
in
question.
that way. So how do you see this fact, or what's your take on this?
Isn't that a very often asked question about dynastic politics? How do you address this?
Everyone's
Briefly.
staring at me, so I'll better answer the question. There are 3 dozen parties, and you're right, some parties perhaps seem like it's been run from a very centralized point of view. But those parties are in existence because consistently people have voted for those parties. I won't take names because you know all the parties that you're referring to. See, the ultimate judge of anyone's merit is the voters. Today, 18.5 lakh voters are voting in Ajmer constituency. They have a choice who they want to vote for. And there are 26 candidates. So it's not that there are only 2 families or 2 parties, 26 candidates would one day become MP for 1 year.
So electoral validation.
Validation, but the other point I want to add before I give the mic, that young lady asked a question about divisive politics, etc. Why Pavanji can say clearly that it's being done because politicians want to come to power is because that pays dividends. The minute people of India or any state start voting out a government because there's no maths teacher in a school, that's when this will end. People don't vote out governments because of, no doctor, no teacher. That's the sad part. If that starts happening, it becomes the pivot of an election campaign, then you'll see politicians responding appropriately.
Jyoti, you want to add briefly?
But they did that. They did that in the last elections. They did that.
They may do it again.
Yeah,
too.
they.
Well, I think they'll do it in the 3 by-elections voting today.
They did it. Now coming to the second question, मैं आपकी बात से पूरी तरह सहमत हूँ. सच्चा लोकतंत्र वही है जहाँ इंटरनल डेमोक्रेसी भी उतनी ही मजबूत हो. डायनेस्टिक पॉलिटिक्स में ये हो नहीं सकता, ओलिगार्की में हो नहीं सकता. इसलिए ऐसी पार्टीज को सबसे पहले वोट आउट करना चाहिए. लेकिन दूसरी महत्वपूर्ण बात, मेरी बात सुनिए, 1 मिनट उत्तर देने दीजिए. इसमें सबसे महत्वपूर्ण बात ये है कि हमें अपने मतदाता को मतवान बनाना होगा. सिद्धांतहीन राजनीति को और सिद्धांतहीन लोकतंत्र को बढ़ाता है. ये सच्चा
hands. I'm going to go at the back. I said I'll take only 2 questions from the front. That lady, okay, the lady in the blue t-shirt.
Ma'am.
You'll have to ask the questions later to the panel.
Myself, Dr. Deepa Sharma, and I'm a civilian of Jaipur, Rajasthan, and my question would be straight to Mr. Sachin Pilot. Whatever is happening in our state, Rajasthan, that is, we are suppressing democracy nowadays. There has been a lot of incidents about that. And opposition is totally silent. And my question would be straight to you. What is your take on Padmavat controversy? Because according to me, this is a caste-based politics. This is a vote-bank politics. This is not at all a real agenda, real protest. This is a political move thing. So wait a second. We all want to watch Padmavat in Rajasthan. No, ma'am. Actually, we are killing the democracy. We want to watch the Padmavat movie, but state government is just influencing under the Karni Sena goons, that is Kayar Sena, that is not Karni Sena. What they are doing, they are vandalizing everything.
Okay.
They have maligned our state's image in whole India, in whole Rajasthan.
Give them an opportunity to answer.
Yeah. So also why Sachin ji, you and Rahul Gandhi has not released any kind of statement
please
till
let
now
the
on
panel
this movie.
answer, madam.
Supreme Court has ordered.
Neelima, I don't understand one thing. जब हम लोग सरकार में थे ना, इस देश में कुछ भी हो अच्छा बुरा होता था, लोग हमसे पूछते थे. आज हम विपक्ष में, आज भी लोग हमसे पूछ रहे हैं. आप nobody is asking the government of India, government of Rajasthan, what is happening in our states, what's happening in India, the Central Board of Certification, the INV ministry,
but
the
Sachin,
Chief Minister.
You're hang on. Political party.
Hang on. There must be parity in what the question is and what you must also adhere to. The people who have taken oath to represent the people of Rajasthan and people of India, abide by Supreme Court and yet respect other people's views, must answer what the stand is. Now hang on, governments after governments are banning the film, government of India is not interfering. I always believe that anything done, drama, song or play or a movie, if it hurts the sentiments of people, it should really be taken into account. And the other point I want to make is that this movie,
right?
Neelima, the ban, Supreme Court ka ban hai, so right wrong ki baat hi chhod do aap.
Okay.
Dusra point, when the film was being made, 1 saal pehle, the issue first came up, a year ago. At that time, the incident was small. At that time, had the responsible people in government intervened and mediated between the makers and the people who had objections, we would not come to this pass. So why are those people not being held accountable today?
Okay, so I'm going to take one last question from this gentleman in grey.
Why don't you allow the other panelists to answer about that question?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Jyoti ji, please. Okay, I'm sorry there are going to be no more questions. This will be the last answer unless... Please, Jyoti ji, please answer on the Karni Sena.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes. Please answer.
इस प्रश्न का सीधा उत्तर ये है कि जन के मन में जो श्रद्धा के केंद्र होते हैं वो जन के श्रद्धा के केंद्र है. उसका उत्तर आपने दे दिया. मुझे इसका उत्तर देने की ज़रूरत नहीं. बट एट द सेम टाइम मैं जन की श्रद्धा के केंद्र, जिसके लिए सचिन ने भी कहा, जिसके लिए कि निश्चित तौर पर हमारे कुछ एक ऐसे श्रद्धा के केंद्र हैं जिन श्रद्धा के केंद्रों को बचाना राष्ट्र की अस्मिता का भी काम होता है.
तो मैडम, आप करनी सेना को सपोर्ट करती हैं इन इट्स अपोजिशन टू करनी से ना-
आपने मेरे प्रश्न की गहराई को भी नहीं समझा,
नहीं, हो सकता
उसके
है।
उत्तर की गहराई को भी
हो
नहीं।
सकता है, आप बताएं वापस। I want a simple answer from the panel. Is Karni Sena right in its action against Padmavati? I know we are running out of time. Very briefly.
If anybody takes law into their own hands, no matter what Sena they belong to, it should be stopped. It's wrong to take law into their hands.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
किसी भी तरीके की लॉ एंड और हमारे गृह मंत्री ने इसका बढ़िया सही उत्तर दिया था, मैं उन्हें ही कोट करूंगी। लॉ एंड ऑर्डर की रक्षा करते हुए राजस्थान के सम्मान की रक्षा की जाएगी।
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for a wonderful discussion. Any more questions, please ask the panelists after the session. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause to our very eloquent and spirited panelists, Jyoti Kiran ji, Colonel Manvendra Singh, Pavan Varma, Sachin Pilot, and the wonderful Kota Neelima. The Z Jaipur Literature Festival is also happy to welcome from the gracious Diggi family, Heir Apparent Raghav Diggi for the customary scarves presentation. Thank you.